All over the world, narrow canals and shipping lanes carry the lifeblood of our global economy. They may look small on a map, but a single blockage in one of them would be devastating. Stay with me, I'm going to count down 15 canals and waterways so vital that a single blockage could crash the economy. Starting with number 15, the Kiel Canal. The Kiel Canal, located in northern Germany, is one of the most heavily used artificial waterways in the world. It goes for over 100 kilometers and it connects the North Sea with the Baltic Sea at Kiel-Holtenau. This shortcut saves ships a voyage of about 460 kilometers around a peninsula of Denmark, reducing sailing times by as much as 1 or 2 days. For cargo carriers, container ships, and bulk vessels, this canal is not just a matter of convenience, it is a cost-saving and fuel-saving necessity. It was opened in 1895 under the name Kaiser Wilhelm Canal. The waterway has since been expanded to handle modern shipping, and today it handles more than 30,000 vessels that go through each year, carrying about 90 million tons of goods. That traffic includes containerized trade, oil and gas shipments, coal, grain, and even industrial equipment. Many of the vessels here are engaged in what's known as intra-European trade, moving goods between Scandinavia, Germany, the Baltic states, and other European ports. A blockage of this canal could have an immediate effect on economies of northern Europe. Instead of a shortcut, ships would need to travel around Denmark, a longer and more expensive route. For shipping companies already under pressure from tight delivery schedules, that extra sailing time would create bottlenecks in logistics chains. Industries in Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Poland that rely on just-in-time deliveries of raw materials and components would face delays. While Germany is heavily invested in maintaining and modernizing the canal, projects have included widening and deepening sections to accommodate larger vessels. However, this infrastructure remains under constant strain due to the high level of use. Closures for repairs are not uncommon, and each time that happens, shipping companies immediately feel the impact in both time and cost. This canal is not on the same scale as global choke points like the Suez Canal or Panama Canal, but within Europe, it is of critical importance. Its closure, even temporary, would cause economic stress in one of the most industrialized regions in the world. Number 14, the Corinth Canal. The Corinth Canal in Greece is not just a large waterway by modern shipping standards, but its strategic value cannot be overstated. At just over 6 kilometers in length and about 24 meters wide at its base, this canal slices through the Isthmus of Corinth, linking the Aegean Sea with the Ionian Sea. This man-made passage allows ships to avoid the long journey around the Peloponnese Peninsula, a detour of about 700 kilometers. Completed in 1893, the Corinth Canal has a long history of strategic importance. Even in ancient times, rulers dreamed of cutting a passage through the isthmus, though the technology of the era made it impossible. Instead, Greeks built the diolkos, a stone-paved trackway across which ships were hauled. The eventual completion of the modern canal created a direct maritime route that remains vital today. Although too narrow for most modern cargo vessels and tankers, the Corinth Canal is essential for regional trade. It handles several thousand ships per year, carrying agricultural goods, manufactured products, and tourists on cruises. For Greece, which is heavily dependent on maritime activity, the canal has both economic and symbolic significance. Blockages of it, though not frequent, have happened. Landslides in 2021 forced the closure of the waterway for over a year, while engineers stabilized the cliffs. That impact was felt immediately by regional shipping and tourism. Commercial operators had to sail around the Peloponnese, adding days to the journey and increasing costs. The canal also plays a role in military and strategic logistics. It's been used by naval fleets in both world wars, and it remains relevant for Greek defense forces. The narrowness makes it unsuitable for supertankers or large container ships, but for smaller vessels, it provides a vital shortcut. If the canal were permanently closed, global shipping wouldn't collapse, but the local and regional impact would be severe. The extra distance around southern Greece would add costs to trade routes connecting the Black Sea, Eastern Med, and Western Europe. For Greece itself, the loss of a toll, revenue, and tourism would be significant, showing how even small canals can play large roles in economic networks in a region. Number 13, the Houston Ship Canal. The Houston Ship Canal. This is one of the most critical maritime arteries in North America. It serves as the main connection between the Gulf of Mexico and the Port of Houston. It extends for about 80 kilometers inland from the Gulf through Galveston Bay. This channel is the gateway to one of the busiest and most strategically important ports in the United States. It's vital not only for Texas, but for the entire United States economy. The channel supports the Port of Houston, which ranks among the top U.S. ports in terms of foreign tonnage and container traffic. This port is the leading hub for the import and export of petroleum, liquefied natural gas, chemicals, and other energy-related products. Houston is often referred to as the energy capital of the world, and this channel is at the center of that title. Refineries and petrochemical plants line its banks, producing gasoline, plastics, fertilizers, and other products that supply domestic and international markets. In 2023, the port handled more than 55 million tons of containerized cargo and over 275 million tons of total trade. The bulk of this traffic is energy-related, but other goods, including agricultural exports, machinery, and consumer products, also flow through here. The channel is critical for U.S. crude oil exports, which have risen sharply since the U.S. lifted its ban on these exports in 2015. A blockage of the Houston Ship Canal would immediately disrupt the U.S. energy sector. The channel has experienced some temporary closures in the past, often due to accidents. In 2019, for example, a collision between two barges spilled toxic chemicals and forced the waterway to close for several days. Hurricanes in the Gulf also occasionally suspend operations. Each time, the impact is immediate and costly, with billions of dollars in trade just put on hold. Efforts are ongoing to expand and modernize the channel, with projects to widen and deepen it to handle larger vessels. Still, though, the vulnerability to accidents, natural disasters, or even blockages highlights how dependent the U.S. economy is on this single waterway. Number 12. The St. Lawrence Seaway. The St. Lawrence Seaway. This is a system of canals, locks, and channels that links the Great Lakes with the Atlantic Ocean, making it one of the most important inland waterways in the world. Opened in 1959, the Seaway stretches more than 3,700 kilometers when combined with the Great Lakes, allowing ships to sail from Duluth, Minnesota, on Lake Superior all the way to the Atlantic. This waterway is a joint project between Canada and the United States, and it plays a central role in the economies of both nations. It provides an outlet for agricultural exports from the American Midwest and Canadian prairies, including wheat, corn, and soybeans. It also facilitates the shipment of iron ore, coal, steel, petroleum, and manufactured goods. In 2024, the system carried more than 36 million tons of cargo, much of it bulk commodities essential for North American industries. Now, one of the most significant features of it is the lock system, which allows ocean-going vessels to bypass the natural obstacles of the St. Lawrence River, including rapids and elevation changes. The locks also connect the inland ports of Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and Toronto to international markets, making them globally relevant trade centers. Without this seaway, these inland cities would be effectively landlocked for ocean-going trade. A blockage of the St. Lawrence Seaway would immediately affect multiple industries. Grain exports from Canada and the U.S. would be stranded, forcing shippers to seek alternative routes, often at higher cost and less efficiency. Manufacturing centers in Ontario and the U.S. Midwest would face shortages in raw materials and delay in exports. The sea has closed in the past due to ice in the winter months, which already restricts shipping for part of the year, but an unexpected closure during the navigation season would have far-reaching consequences. For example, a labor strike in 2023 shut down traffic for over a week, affecting more than 200 ships and halting trade worth hundreds of millions. Even such a short disruption has cascading effects on supply chains. The St. Lawrence Seaway is often described as the fourth seacoast of North America because of its role in connecting the heart of the continent to the rest of the world. Its importance goes beyond economics. It represents the close cooperation between Canada and the U.S. in managing a shared and vital waterway. Number 11. The Strait of Malacca Shipping Channel. The Strait of Malacca is not technically a man-made canal, but its role as a shipping channel makes it functionally similar in global trade networks. Located between the Malay Peninsula and the Indonesian island of Sumatra, the strait is about 890 kilometers long and at its narrowest point near Singapore, only about 2.7 kilometers wide. This makes it one of the most important maritime choke points in the world, connecting the Indian Ocean with the South China Sea and the Pacific. Roughly 90,000 ships transit the strait each year, carrying about 40% of global trade. It is crucial for the transport of energy. Nearly all the crude oil and liquefied natural gas heading from the Middle East to East Asia, especially to China, Japan, and South Korea, pass through this narrow passage. Estimates suggest that over 16 million barrels of oil per day transit the strait, making it the second busiest energy passage in the world after the Strait of Hormuz. A closure or blockage would disrupt energy supply chains for some of the world's largest economies. Asian manufacturing hubs rely on imported energy, and delays in shipments would cause immediate slowdowns in production. Consumer goods, electronics, automobiles, raw materials all flow through this corridor, meaning the ripple effects would be felt across industries worldwide. The vulnerability of this strait is well understood. The narrowness makes it susceptible to accidents like ship collisions or groundings. Piracy, although reduced in recent years, still remains a concern though. Regional geopolitical tensions adds another layer of risk, since any conflict in Southeast Asia could threaten the security of the passage. Shipping companies and governments have considered alternatives such as pipelines through Myanmar or the proposed Canal across southern Thailand, but none provide the same scale or efficiency. Any disruptions in the Strait of Malacca would likely cause oil and gas prices to surge. Tankers would be forced to reroute around Indonesia, adding thousands of kilometers and substantial costs. For countries like Japan, which imports nearly all of its energy, or China, whose economy depends on steady oil and gas, such a closure would be deeply destabilizing. The Strait of Malacca shows how even natural waterways, when narrow and heavily used, operate like man-made canals in the global economy. Number 10. The Delaware Bay Shipping Channel. The Delaware River and its connecting channel to Delaware Bay may not be as famous as the Suez or Panama Canal, but the importance of it to the economy of the United States is enormous. This 134-kilometer waterway provides deep water access to the ports of Philadelphia, Camden, and Wilmington, some of the busiest on the U.S. East Coast. The Delaware River-Delaware Bay system is vital for energy imports, containerized goods, and bulk cargo. It handles millions of tons of petroleum products, liquefied natural gas, chemicals, and agricultural products each year. In addition, major ports along the waterway handle large volumes of fruit, cocoa, coffee, and refrigerated cargo, making it a hub for agricultural imports into the U.S. The shipping channel has been deepened over the years to accommodate some larger vessels. In 2019, a long-term dredging project was completed, which increased the channel depth to 45 feet, that's just over 13 meters. And this expansion allowed the region to receive what's known as post-Panamax ships, which are large container vessels capable of transiting the expanded Panama Canal. Without that upgrade, the ports along the Delaware would have risked losing competitiveness in the global shipping market. A blockage in the Delaware River Channel would create immediate problems. Fuel supplies would be disrupted, causing shortages and price increases in heavily populated areas like Philadelphia, New York, and New Jersey. Food imports, too, would also be delayed, affecting grocery distribution chains. Given that the ports of Philadelphia and Wilmington are critical gateways for refrigerated and perishable goods, the ripple effect of that could stretch across the country. The channel has faced closures before, usually due to accidents. For instance, in 2004, a tanker spill of over 260,000 gallons of crude temporarily shut down parts of the river, leading to significant economic costs. Ice in winter months, too, has also occasionally slowed shipping, and each time the disruption highlights how dependent the whole region is on this single waterway. Number 9. The Bosphorus Strait. The Bosphorus Strait, located in Turkey, is one of the most geopolitically sensitive yet economically vital waterways on the planet. Though it is a natural strait rather than a man-made canal, it functions like one in practice, serving as the only maritime connection between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. This narrow, winding waterway, just 30 kilometers long and less than a kilometer wide at some points, cuts through the heart of Istanbul. Its importance is not only from the staggering volume of trade that it carries, but also from the fact that it serves as the only maritime outlet for several countries, including Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, Bulgaria, and Romania. The Bosphorus Strait is part of the Turkish straits, which also includes the Sea of Marmara and the Dardanelles, forming a corridor of sorts that links the Black Sea with global oceans. According to Turkey's Ministry of Transport, more than 40,000 vessels transit the Bosphorus annually, carrying over 600 million tons of cargo. Among that cargo, crude oil and oil products are significant. Roughly 3% of global oil supply passes through the strait each day. But the economic impact of a blockage here would be immediate and severe. For Russia and Ukraine, whose economies are deeply reliant on the export of oil, grain, and other commodities, losing access to this route would cut them off from Mediterranean markets. In fact, nearly all of Ukraine's grain exports that are shipped by sea must transit the Bosphorus. Similarly, Russian oil tankers heading to Europe and beyond depend on the strait. Disruptions here would send energy markets into turmoil, drive up food prices, and further destabilize the region's already vulnerable supply shocks. Turkey has long recognized both the importance and the risks of the strait. To reduce congestion, provide an alternative route, the Turkish government has proposed the Istanbul Canal, a massive project designed to parallel the Bosphorus by cutting through the European side of Istanbul. And the canal, if completed, would be about 45 kilometers long and capable of handling some of the world's largest ships. Supporters argue it will ease pressure and provide a safer, more modern route. Critics, however, highlight, of course they do, the environmental concerns and the massive cost of the project, which is estimated at over $15 billion. Now, beyond commerce, the Bosphorus also has immense geopolitical importance. The Montreux Convention of 1936 grants Turkey control over the straits and regulates the transit of naval ships. This agreement remains central to the balance of power between NATO countries and Black Sea nations like Russia. In times of conflict, Turkey's ability to restrict or allow access gives it outsized influence on global security. For instance, during the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, control of the Bosphorus has been a crucial factor in determining which naval assets can operate in the Black Sea. Number 8. The Cape Cod Canal. So at first glance, the Cape Cod Canal in Massachusetts might seem way less significant than waterways like the Panama or Suez Canal. It's only about 11 kilometers long, cutting across the narrow neck of land that connects Cape Cod to mainland Massachusetts. But despite this modest size, the canal plays a surprisingly vital role in the U.S. maritime economy and the functioning of shipping along the East Coast. Completed in 1914, the Cape Cod Canal was built to provide a safe and efficient passage for vessels moving between Boston and New York. Before the canal, the ships had to sail around the outer edge of Cape Cod. That's an area that's notorious for rough seas, shifting shoals, and frequent shipwrecks. It's known as the graveyard of the Atlantic. Those waters have claimed thousands of vessels over the centuries, and by cutting through the isthmus, the canal provided not only a faster route, but also a far safer one, reducing the voyage by about 135 kilometers. Today, the canal is owned and operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it remains one of the busiest artificial sea level canals in the world without tolls. On average, more than 14,000 commercial and recreational vessels transit each year. Among these are barges carrying petroleum products, coal, road salt, and building materials, as well as fishing vessels and cargo carriers that service New England's industries and cities. For Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and part of Connecticut, the canal is indispensable for ensuring steady supplies of fuel and construction material. Another reason the canal is strategically significant is its military use. During World War II, the U.S. Navy used the Cape Cod Canal to move warships and supply vessels safely away from the threat of German U-boats lurking off the coast. The canal provided a protected route between naval bases and shipyards, reducing exposure to enemy attacks. Today, while the military reliance is way less pronounced, the canal still offers a valuable shortcut for Coast Guard and naval vessels patrolling the East Coast. Although not even close to the same global scale as the Bosphorus or Suez, the Cape Cod Canal's role is best understood in regional terms. For New England, it's a vital artery of commerce and energy. A prolonged closure here, whether from maintenance, accident, or natural disaster, would disrupt fuel distribution, drive up costs, and weaken supply chains in a region with limited alternatives. Moving on to number 7, the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, though a natural waterway rather than a man-made canal, is one of the most strategically vital marine choke points in the world. It's located between Oman and Iran. The strait is only about 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, yet it carries nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply. Its role in our global economy is comparable to, and in some respects even greater than, the Suez and Panama Canals, making it indispensable in any discussion of waterways that keep the world moving. Every day, an estimated 20 to 22 million barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz, along with significant quantities of LNG, primarily from Qatar. Tankers leaving Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar must pass through the strait to reach markets in Asia, Europe, and beyond. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, around 21% of global petroleum liquid consumption transits this single waterway. But the strait's vulnerability is a constant concern. The narrowness makes it easy to disrupt through accidents, blockages, or deliberate actions. Tensions between Iran and the United States, along with Iran's regional rivals, have often centered on the strait. Iran has repeatedly threatened to close it in response to sanctions or military pressure, and while such a move would also hurt Iran's own economy, even temporary disruptions could cause significant turmoil. The international community has invested heavily in securing the strait. The U.S. maintains a strong naval presence in the Persian Gulf alongside allies to ensure freedom of navigation. Nevertheless, the risk remains high. A single well-placed mine or a large-scale attack on shipping could block or severely limit traffic. Given the dependence of Asian economies on the Gulf energy, the effects would be global and immediate. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most vivid examples of how fragile global supply chains can be when concentrated through narrow waterways. Its uninterrupted operation isn't just vital, it's essential to the functioning of our modern world. Number 6. The Singapore Strait. The Singapore Strait, located on the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, is one of the busiest and most critical shipping lanes. It goes for about 105 kilometers, and it connects the Strait of Malacca to the South China Sea, effectively serving as the eastern gateway to the Malacca route. Its importance is magnified by its connection to the port of Singapore, which does consistently rank as one of the top-tier container ports in the world, handling over 600 million tons of cargo annually. Nearly every container ship traveling between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific has to pass through this corridor. Estimates suggest that about 1,000 vessels transit the strait every day, carrying everything from crude oil and liquefied natural gas to manufactured goods, electronics, and raw materials. Oil tankers bound for China, Japan, and South Korea, as well as LNG carriers from Qatar, Australia, and the US, use the passage, and it also supports Singapore's own energy infrastructure, as the city-state hosts one of the world's largest oil refining complexes. The Port of Singapore is also a hub for transshipment, meaning it handles cargo that's transferred from one vessel to another on its way to its final destination. This makes it a critical node in global supply chains, particularly for electronics, textiles, and consumer goods. And if the strait were blocked, not only would goods be delayed, but the efficiency of global logistics would collapse. The strategic importance of the strait is not lost on regional and global powers. Singapore maintains one of the most advanced navies and coast guards in Southeast Asia to ensure security, while international naval cooperation helps deter piracy. Still, though, its location near contested waters of the South China Sea adds some geopolitical tension. Any conflict in this region could threaten free flow of trade through this corridor. A closure of the strait would be catastrophic. Unlike the Suez or Panama Canals, which have alternatives, though costly and lengthy, there's no practical alternative to the Singapore Strait for ships moving between India and Pacific Ocean. Rerouting around Indonesia would add thousands of kilometers and increase fuel costs dramatically. For energy-importing nations like China and Japan, as well as export-dependent economies like Vietnam, South Korea, and Malaysia, such a disruption would have immediate consequences. The strait is more than just a regional waterway. It's one of the most vital arteries of global commerce, and it connects some of the most dynamic economies in the world. Number 5. The Dardanelles Strait. The Dardanelles Strait is one of the most important waterways, not only because of its position, but also the immense economic, political, and historical weight that it carries. Located in northwestern Turkey, this narrow strait connects the Aegean Sea with the Sea of Marmara, and through the Bosphorus Strait links the Black Sea with the Mediterranean. It's just 61 kilometers long and as little as 1.2 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, yet the amount of trade and energy that passes through it makes it one of the most vital checkpoints on Earth. Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and Georgia all depend on this passage to ship their goods to the rest of the world. It carries hundreds of millions of tons of cargo annually, ranging from crude oil and natural gas to grain, steel, coal, and manufactured products. At certain times, as many as 3 million barrels of oil per day have flowed through the Turkish straits, much of it through the Dardanelles. The impact of any closure or blockage here would be immediate and far-reaching. Europe, which relies on imported energy, would feel the pressure quickly, while Asian economies dependent on global oil flow would face rising costs. Ukraine and Russia are among the world's largest exporters of wheat and other grains, and much of that grain is destined for developing nations in Africa and the Middle East. Countries like Egypt, Lebanon, and Bangladesh depend heavily on those imports. A prolonged disruption would send grain prices soaring. The importance of the Dardanelles is not a modern phenomenon. It's been a strategic waterway for thousands of years. Known in antiquity as the Hellespont, it appears throughout ancient history and mythology. The legendary city of Troy was located near its entrance, controlling access to the strait. Greek mythology describes Leander swimming across the Hellespont to visit Hero, and the strait even takes its name from Helle, a figure who supposedly fell into its waters during a mythical fight. The strait also played a central role in the Byzantine and Ottoman empires. Both powers built fortresses along its shores to defend passage and assert their authority. When the Ottomans captured Constantinople in 1453, they cemented control over both the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, giving them mastery over the Black Sea trade. During World War I, the Allies launched the Gallipoli campaign in an attempt to seize the strait and force a sea route to Russia. The campaign ended in disaster for the Allies, but it showed the Dardanelles' importance as the lifeline between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. And besides, geopolitical instability adds another layer of vulnerability. The Dardanelles sits at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, surrounded by regions of conflict and tension. Rivalries between NATO and Russia, conflicts in the Middle East, and internal political pressures in Turkey all converge here. Any deliberate attempt to block or disrupt traffic through the strait would cause global shockwaves. The risks aren't theoretical. Iran has threatened to disrupt shipping in the Persian Gulf, and Russia has used energy and food exports as tools of leverage. If similar tactics were employed in the Dardanelles, the world would see immediate consequences in markets, supply chains, and political stability. Number 4. The South China Sea shipping lanes. Now, the South China Sea is not a canal in the strict sense, but its role in global commerce makes it function as one of the most critical shipping corridors in the world. Every year, more than 50,000 merchant vessels sail through the South China Sea, and estimates suggest that 1/3 of global maritime trade, worth over $3 trillion annually, passes through here. The scale is kind of incomprehensible. The sea here carries more cargo than the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, and the Straits of Hormuz combined. For energy, it's indispensable. Tankers carrying crude from the Middle East to China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan have to pass through the South China Sea. It is just as important, too, for manufactured goods. Container ships leaving Chinese ports carrying electronics, machinery, clothing, and countless consumer products destined for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East follow these lanes. Agricultural products also move through the region in huge quantities, from Australian wheat to Southeast Asian palm oil. In many respects, the sea is not just a body of water here, but the conveyor belt of the modern world economy. The traffic density in some areas rivals that of a highway system, with hundreds of ships visible at any given time. Collisions, groundings, and other accidents would have major consequences, especially when oil tankers and LNG carriers are involved. The political environment, too, makes the South China Sea precarious. The waters are claimed in whole or in part by multiple countries like China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. China's sweeping 9-line claim, which covers almost the entire thing, has been rejected under international law, but continues to be asserted by Beijing. In practice, this means that overlapping claims to reefs, islands, and shoals, many of which have been fortified and militarized in recent decades, artificial islands built by China complete with airstrips, radar stations, and missile systems, now dot the sea, adding to tensions and heightening the risk of conflict. Number 3. The English Channel and the Dover Strait. The English Channel, and more specifically its narrowest section known as the Dover Strait, is one of the most heavily used vital maritime corridors in the world. At its slimmest point, between Dover on the British side and Calais on the French side, the channel measures about 33 kilometers across. It might seem like a modest body of water, but the level of global commerce and passenger traffic that flows through this passage every day makes it one of the most important arteries of the global economy. Every single year, more than 500 ships pass through the strait on a typical day, translating to nearly 200,000 vessels annually. They carry a volume of trade that is staggering, estimated at over $1 trillion worth of goods each year. Container ships, oil tankers, ferries, bulk carriers, and fishing fleets all share the channel, making it complex and highly regulated. For the UK, this waterway represents its main physical connection to continental Europe. About a quarter of Britain's trade in goods passes through the strait, with ferries and roll-on, roll-off cargo vessels carrying everything from food, fuel, and manufactured goods to cars and electronics. The port of Dover alone handles over 2.5 million trucks annually, accounting for a huge proportion of the nation's imports and exports. A disruption even lasting a few days here would see supermarket shelves empty and industries struggle to secure parts and materials. The significance of this channel extends far beyond the UK and France. The ports of Rotterdam, Antwerp, and Hamburg, the 3 largest ports in Europe, are all connected to the rest of the world by way of the English Channel. Shipping to and from Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas typically uses this corridor to reach Northern Europe's industrial sector. The channel, too, has also become a focal point for passengers. Ferries shuttle constantly between Dover and Calais, and the Channel Tunnel carries trains beneath the seabed, transporting passengers and freight. Millions of people travel through the corridor each year, whether for tourism, business, or migration. The combined system of ferries, container ships, and rails make this region one of the most interconnected transportation networks on the planet. Geopolitical considerations do add another layer of complexity. This channel sits between NATO members, but that doesn't make it immune to tensions. In times of political strain between the UK and its European neighbors, the possibility of disruptions to port access or customs processing has shown just how fragile supply chains can be. During the Brexit transition, delays at Dover and Calais highlighted just how quickly backlogs can form. Long queues of trucks on both sides of the channel served as a reminder that even minor regulatory or logistical hiccups in this corridor can ripple out across entire economies. A full-scale backlog of the Dover Strait, whether caused by an accident, a natural disaster, or even deliberate act, would be devastating. Europe's busiest ports would face immediate bottlenecks, and Britain would experience shortages of essential goods within days. The UK imports a large share of its fresh produce from Europe, and a prolonged closure would cause prices to rise really quickly while leaving the supermarket shelves bare. Number 2. The Suez Canal. Finally, the Suez Canal. It is perhaps the most famous man-made waterway in the world, and for good reason. Stretching 193 kilometers across Egypt, it connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea, providing the shortest maritime route between Europe and Asia. Since its opening in 1869, the canal has been one of the most strategically important pieces of infrastructure in the world, serving as a lifeline for shipping between continents. The significance of this canal lies in the distance that it saves. Without it, ships traveling between Europe and Asia would have to go around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa, a journey that would add thousands of kilometers and weeks to the voyage. With the canal, a ship sailing from Rotterdam to Mumbai cuts its travel distance by 7,000 kilometers. That reduction not only saves time, but dramatically reduces any fuel cost. Today, the Suez Canal handles more than 20,000 vessels each year, carrying about 12% of the global trade. It's especially important for containerized cargo, oil, liquefied natural gas, and bulk goods like grain. Around 2 billion barrels of oil per year pass through here, along with nearly 8% of the world's LNG. But the vulnerabilities of this canal were thrown into sharp relief in March of 2021, when a ship, the Ever Given, a massive container ship, ran aground and blocked the waterway for 6 days. Over 400 ships were delayed, and it was estimated that the blockage cost the global economy nearly $10 billion per day in trade disruptions. Oil prices rose by several percentage points, supply chains stalled, and ports around the world faced a backlog of delayed cargo. This one event demonstrated how a single mishap in the Suez Canal could paralyze global logistics. The Egyptian government has invested heavily in expanding and modernizing it, and in 2015 it completed the new Suez Canal project, which involved constructing a parallel channel along a portion of the route to allow two-way traffic. If the Suez Canal were blocked for an extended period, the consequences would be severe. European importers of Asian goods would face immediate shortages, while oil and gas markets around the world would see sharp price spikes. The Ever Given incident was a short-lived crisis, but it proved like a glimpse how fragile global supply chains can be when reliant on a single narrow waterway. Number 1. The Panama Canal. I mean, come on. You knew it was coming. The Panama Canal, cutting across Central America, it is one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history and a cornerstone of global commerce. Completed in 1914, after decades of planning and construction, this 82-kilometer-long waterway connects the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans through a series of locks and artificial lakes. Like the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal is vital because of the distance it saves. Without it, ships traveling between the east and west coasts of the Americas or between Europe and Asia would have to sail around Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America, adding nearly 13,000 kilometers. And yet the canal handles roughly 13,000 to 14,000 transits annually, carrying over 250 million tons of cargo. For the United States, the canal is vital. It allows Gulf Coast and East Coast ports to connect efficiently with Asia, and it enables U.S. agricultural exports from the Midwest to reach the Asian markets. And containerized cargo from East Asia to the East Coast also rely heavily on it, as do shipments of LNG from the U.S. to global customers. But one of the most significant upgrades in this canal's history came in 2016 with the completion of the Panama Canal expansion, also known as the Third Set of Locks project. This $5.25 billion project added a new lane of traffic with larger locks, enabling the passage of these new Panamax ships, vessels much larger than those previously accommodated. The expansion doubled the canal's capacity, allowing it to handle about 6% of global maritime trade. Without this upgrade, the canal did risk losing relevance as a global shipping shifted more towards mega vessels. The canal is critical not just for the US, but also for Asia and Latin America. Major economies like China, Japan, and South Korea rely on it to move goods to the eastern US and Europe. Latin American nations use it to export commodities like copper, bananas, and coffee. Oil and gas shipments, particularly from the US, have made it increasingly important for global energy too. But despite its importance, it does face some challenges down there. One of the most pressing is water scarcity. The canal relies on fresh water from nearby lakes to operate its locks, and droughts in recent years have forced restrictions on ship drafts and reduced the daily transits. In 2023, one of the worst droughts in decades limited the number of ships allowed through the canal each day, creating delays and adding costs to shipping. Climate change here poses an ongoing threat to the canal's reliability.